Hit my first 10K month in 3 months. But I worked a lot harder than the majority of people are prepared to work in those initial stages. Started that company at 23 years old, made my first million at 25. I'm a massive believer in the law of attraction and manifestation. I didn't even know what manifestation was until like 2-3 years ago. Like into the business, someone told me and I was like, wow, I've been doing that my whole life. But actually feel it, you know, like actually feel that emotion. Like I'm going to embody the person that I need to become to actually achieve that thing. And I do truly believe that we can mold the energy around us and be able to literally fabricate the reality around us.
Hello everyone and welcome to Faster Podcast, where we share high-level conversations with high-level individuals and give you the secrets to their success. Today I'm joined by Jordan Platten, and he's a very interesting guy with a lot going on. So Jordan, I'll let you do the introduction because I don't want to undersell you to our audience.
Well, thank you first of all for doing this, man. I'm looking forward to it. Nice little drive in the morning, can't complain. So yeah, my name is Jordan Platten. I'm 28 years old from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and I'm a digital agency owner. I own an e-commerce marketing agency and an e-learning business. Started that company at 23 years old, made my first million at 25. The rest is history, really. That's a quick snapshot.
Every time I do these podcasts and people start talking about what time they did what and at what age they did what, it always makes me feel bad, man. A million by, did you say 25?
25, yeah.
That's insane. So I'd love to get into how you got into starting your agency and stuff, but let's start with that though. How did it feel hitting that big 1 million mark at such a young age?
You know, something that I didn't do very good at the start of my business is delayed gratification. I rewarded myself very quickly when I started doing well. So like within the 6 months of starting the business of it doing well, I'd already bought a Rolex and a BMW M4, and then 3 months after the M4, I bought a Cayman GT4. And so like by the time the million came, it was just a number. It was like a monopoly thing. So it didn't hit the same emotions that I kind of wanted it to hit necessarily before I got it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So let's get to that. How did you start an agency and why did you go the entrepreneurial route?
Well, I mean, I suppose I always kind of struggled with authority in school and in education. I never really liked having to do things that I didn't want to or actually have a choice in doing. So I didn't really like studying subjects that I didn't enjoy and so on. And so I always wanted that kind of freedom over my own choices. I went to university. I actually got kicked out of university because I started a business on the side, stopped attending lectures. So understandably, I got removed. And then I jumped into sales and I just kind of worked my way up the sales ladder for 3 years. And I ended up earning decent money at like 22 years old. I was doing like 50K a year, which is, I don't, like obviously you're from London, so that's probably not a lot in London money, but around here in the sticks, like it's quite a lot of money for 22 years old. And so I was, I kind of found myself on holiday one day and just come back from in the office, coming back from holiday. And I remember having this conversation with my girlfriend at the time, and she was saying like, we have to go back to reality tomorrow. That term, like back to reality. And there's something about that term that I've always found pretty fucked up. Can I swear on this? Am I?
Yeah, no, you're
okay.
Fine.
And so I remember going back to the office and having this conversation about my holiday, and everybody else was talking about their holidays. And I was like, I'm not going to live in this cycle for the rest of my life where I'm just kind of working and enslaving myself to this just one holiday that's over before I even started. And then I get back and I have to get back to this reality. And I just think that's kind of a really messed up reality for me at that point. And so I decided to kind of look into any business that would be suitable, and being in sales, an agency is a sales driven business. So I just jumped into it. 2 weeks, signed up my first client, and then within the next week I signed up another client and quit my job and just replaced my outgoings, and then just went pretty aggressive with it from there.
So what did you start off with? So like you said, you sort of analyzed your strength, analyzed what you're good at, and you decided you're going to start a social media marketing agency. Yeah. What were those first steps of when you said, okay, I'm committing now? Did you start focusing on sales? Did you build up a brand? Because I know a lot of people nowadays, I think you mentioned it in one of your videos that I saw on your YouTube channel, they decide to start a business, and rather than focusing on getting sales immediately, getting money coming in, they start spending money. You know, they get a website, they get their logos done, things like that. So obviously you achieved sort of that early success quite quickly, which allowed you to quit your job. So what did you start off with?
I think that a lot of people will avoid work if they can avoid working. And so I think the danger that we're in at the moment is that so many people are, their eyes are opened up to what is possible in the world because of like online and YouTube and things like that. And so naturally people avoid the actual gritty work. But when I jumped into my business, I knew that because I've been conditioned for really 3 years being in sales. When you're in a sales-based job, you know that your targets are everything, and like every single day, you're not gonna change the world in one day, but over the course of a couple of months, you're gonna make enough calls for you to get a couple of sales in, and your paycheck's gonna be good. You're gonna get commission. So let's see where this guy's going. So for me, like I had it ingrained in me that sales was the #1 driving force. And sales was the only thing that was going to actually make me successful. And so I set some really basic targets. I set the target of reaching out to 20 companies a day. And I stuck to those targets for months on end until I hit a reasonable figure in the company, hit some basic goals. But I think a lot of people fail to stick to those very, very basic things, and they get distracted by a logo and a website and a bunch of other stuff because it's easier to procrastinate than it is to actually do the work, you know?
Absolutely. And tell us a little bit about your educational side of your agency, what it is that you guys do.
Yeah, so it's like it's a secondary business. It's called the Affluent Academy. Basically, when I started the agency, I wanted to document my journey on YouTube, but for really accountability, I knew that if I went on YouTube and I created a video, and if I was to create a video and talk publicly about what I was going to try and achieve, if I failed, I'd fail publicly, and it wouldn't be an option. So I started documenting that, but in doing that, I had a lot of people reach out to me and from other agencies and say, oh, well, how are you getting clients? How are you signing them up? How are you getting results? And so I started doing like coaching calls on the side. But then time is a limited resource, right? So I ran out of time, and trying to run a business at the same time was difficult. So I started an online course. So I created like a course training product that taught people how they could start their own agencies and scale them up. And over the years, that's kind of progressed into now a kind of a done with you mentorship program. We've got over 2,500 active students. We've helped over 400 people quit their job, technically not quite at the 500 point, and 60 people have hit 6 and 7 figures in their agency. So,
oh wow, that's very impressive. And if someone, let's say, comes to you and says, okay, I want to start an agency, but I'm completely fresh, I have no idea what you're doing, and you do take them on as a client, what would you say would be the first things that you advise them to do to start generating money in your industry?
It's a really simple business model, the agency model, and that's why I like it a lot. I see it as a gateway business for a lot of people because we're not really taught business a lot in school, certainly not where I'm from, and even if you do study business in school, it's really not that great. And so an agency is a very simple model. It's just you approaching someone else and providing a service that empowers their life or makes them more money or gives them a reason to pay you money, right? And so the most important thing, and the simplest thing, is just playing to your unfair advantages. So, okay, I'm local. I'm going to reach out to other local businesses. That gives me an advantage. Do I have any hobbies or interests in a certain industry? If I do, and I've worked in an industry before, then great. I will just reach out to industries like that because that's my unfair advantage. And then all you simply need to do is build a list of companies and actually start contacting them. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy because that's an incredibly daunting thing for a lot of people, is reaching out to people, cold calling them, emailing them, and so on. But the steps that you have to take are very, very simple, you know?
So you spoke about reaching out to people, cold calling, etc. But I know that a lot of people are very scared of doing that. So how did you, I know you started off in sales, but how did you initially start overcoming that fear of rejection and fear of failure that stops a lot of people from actually getting clients?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a big problem. I think a lot of people, if you haven't been conditioned with any kind of failure before, any kind of rejection, then when you jump into a business like an agency, it's a massive shock. And the majority of people that start don't end up succeeding because of that very reason. They have a few rejections and then they get told no, and then they just give up and move on to something else. So I think what's really important is that you understand that failure is part of the process and you welcome that. Like very, very early on in sales, I understood that I was going to get way more no's than I was going to get yeses, and I needed to welcome that. And someone told me something in sales training once. They said that what you have to remember when you're about to make a cold call is that even 5 minutes time and you screwed up on that cold call, even if someone told you like to fuck off, they hang up the phone on you, you haven't actually lost anything. You've just gained experience. Like you're in the exact same position you were 5 minutes ago, but you've got something that maybe you can change on that call, maybe not the next time round. And so I think you just very quickly have to convince yourself and remind yourself that you don't actually have anything to lose by screwing up cold calls or emails or getting rejection. Like nothing negative can come for it, apart from just damaging your ego. But an ego is such a superficial thing that we should all work on anyway, you know?
Absolutely. On your YouTube channel, some of your most successful videos are about paid advertising.
Yeah.
So I know you have some big hits when it comes to how to run Facebook ads, how to run TikTok ads, etc. And how did you learn that stuff? Because you said you dropped out of university and you started off in sales. How did you then transition into paid marketing?
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend people doing the same thing I did, but when I signed up my first ever client, I didn't actually know how to run Facebook ads for them. So I sold them on it, but I didn't know how to run them. And I was like blinded by this Richard Branson quote that was like, if you ever got an opportunity, you don't know how to.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah, say yes tomorrow later. And that's what I did, right? And so I learned on the job. I just watched loads of YouTube videos, but really YouTube is such a great place to learn from. Like I watched YouTube videos, I Googled like how to run Facebook ads for restaurants, and I managed to get them some good results, which was great. But I would recommend other people learning beforehand. But YouTube is a great resource, and it's really not that difficult. I think as long as you understand some very basic kind of sales and marketing skills, you understand how to communicate with people and get messages across to people, which are all skills that can be taught. Then as far as the actual button clicking is concerned, it's not that much of a complicated process, and you get better at it with more and more clients that you sign, you know.
Absolutely. So you mentioned education earlier on, and this is a question that I ask a lot of people on the podcast. What are your thoughts about the requirement for sort of formal education in order to succeed in life?
I think it's really tricky. I think that it's going to become less and less necessary for you to go down the route of university. I only went to university because I felt pressured to do so by my family, because it was just, I kind of almost felt like they'd be a bit ashamed if I didn't at least try and do it. But I think realistically, there's only a few roles, or not a few, but there's only certain jobs that you need to go to university for. And anything else, like if you want to start a business, if you want to start a marketing agency, if you want to get into kind of any industry like that, even some really skilled industries right now are just turning a blind eye to degrees, because it's really about the personality. It's about the individual person, and not necessarily about the bit of paper that tells them that they can or can't do this thing. So, I mean, I'm definitely, I'm not against university, but I do not think it's the right path for 90% of people.
So when you say that you done it because of your family, is that whose opinion you value quite highly? So when you're making these kind of decisions early on in your life, was it because you wanted to please your parents and please your family? Was it?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think those kind of like big ones, like I think because you're quite lost when you're like young and you don't really know how to play life and like what is the right path to take. And so I think you're very easily guided. And so like if society tells you go to school, get good grades, because like I mean like when you're in school, like I think when we had GCSEs, I don't know what it is now. You're told like if you get bad GCSEs, like your life is going to be
done.
You're done.
Yeah.
You're done. But it's like it literally is. I don't even know if anyone's ever looked at my GCSEs. But like I suppose it's good for like conditioning, like working hard in you.
Yeah.
But the actual thing is
I feel like in every step in our life, like because obviously I've graduated university and stuff maybe like 3-4 years ago. But every step that you go in an educational system, as soon as you start the next step, they always tell you, all right, forget what happened before. So you know when you're in like you start year 10 and like, okay, every year before that, forget what happened, like forget your grades, this is the big thing. Then you get into college and all right, forget what happened, this is the big thing.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right. Like it's good to obviously focus and make sure you do your best, but it's not the biggest thing. When you dropped out of university, did your parents sort of have any say in that at all? Were they disappointed? And obviously right now things turned out very well for you, but initially at that point, what was their reaction like?
So I told them I actually got kicked out, but I told them I dropped out. My dad actually found out that I got kicked out 2 years later when I put a YouTube video out, and I forgot that I didn't tell him. So, but they were. I definitely remember them being disappointed in me not continuing. But I was jumping into sales, and I think that at the time I actually was in a load of debt because I was living this really false lifestyle in uni. But I was reassured then that I was jumping into this sales-based role, and I would be much more happy doing that and so on. And surprisingly, they weren't like angry or anything at all. They handled it really, really well. I'm not sure whether we actually hid it from my dad for a period of time until after I was actually in the sales job for a while and actually doing well, because he's not got the cool mind that my mum necessarily does. So
that's usually the case.
Yeah.
You always have one that's sort of, yeah, it's fine, and then you have another one where you kind of want to approach it easily. So you mentioned YouTube, and obviously you now have quite a few videos on YouTube. How did you start that off? Because obviously you started off your marketing agency, and you mentioned that you wanted to document the story, but a lot of people, I feel like they're afraid of being vulnerable and exposing themselves to an audience because they're afraid of criticism and stuff. What was your thinking process like? Did you have any sort of hesitation getting on YouTube initially?
Yeah, like I toyed with the idea years before I started a YouTube channel. I knew these two girls from school who created a really great YouTube channel that was in there. It was in the beauty industry, and it was perfect for them. And they really blew off. And they always used to say to me, "Jordan, you should do a YouTube channel. Like, you should do one." And I never did. But when it came to business, it was the final time, and I was like, oh, actually, like if I'm going to do this, it's kind of now or never. And I knew it'd be a really great way to get customers in, and I'd seen other people in the industry doing it. But it's not an easy thing. Like YouTube is incredibly difficult. Like, as you know, like recording videos is very taxing. And like, you put a camera in front of you, and it's different when you're having this kind of conversation. But if you're sitting on your own, putting a camera in front of you for the first time, like I had all kinds of stutters, and like, I'm like taking 2 hours to record a 10-minute video. Like it's very testing.
It's a big thing, and I think it all comes down to, like you said, delayed gratification as well. Because on YouTube, no one blows up in their first week unless someone puts them on, or they're very well connected and things like that. And I'm exactly the same. Like many of us, I started off with, okay, I'm gonna start a fitness channel. And I remember first time I sat down in front of the camera, I must have took 30 takes to get the intro. And even then it was so bad.
So painful.
Like, because it is something weird about putting the camera in front of you and then trying to speak and things like that. But okay, so going back to your business, how long did it take you to hit, let's say, around £10,000 a month?
In 3 months, I hit my first 10k month in 3 months. But I worked a lot harder than the majority of people are prepared to work in those initial stages because of the sales stuff. But yeah, it was 3 months.
So was that because of the amount of clients that you had, or was it that because you were selling so high ticket services?
Well, we only actually had like 8 clients at that time.
Yeah.
So the average client at that point was paying around £1,500 a month, like across all the clients. We had some clients paying £700, others paying £2,000 or £3,000. So yeah, it was a small number of clients, but it was really just sticking to those daily targets that got me there. And anybody can do that to this day still. It's not always like a quantifiable 3-month thing. Like some people it's 3 months, some people it'll be 6 or even 12 months. But it's just those small daily habits.
So the whole social media marketing industry seems to be the new thing for a lot of people. Of course, in the whole entrepreneurial space, we had a lot of cycles. So we had the drop shippers, we had the Forex traders, we had the crypto people.
Yeah.
And now I feel like social media marketing is becoming the new thing.
Yeah.
And you see channels popping up every day promising to teach you how to do it, teach you how to make X amount of money. As someone who's been in the industry for a long time, how would you, if you were a person trying to learn, how would you approach sort of filtering out these people and seeing who's actually doing what they say they're doing and who's just out there to get their money? And then
I think it's actually very easy to do that. First of all, like caveat, like it's so frustrating, like seeing like an industry that you've been in for a very long time become popularized in a sense where it just gets swamped by low quality shit. Basically, there's so many new channels and so on. But I think it's very easy to filter out the people that you don't want to follow, and it's just like, okay, does this person actually have an agency? Have they actually done the thing? Like, I'm pretty sure that like I'm maybe one of 2 people on YouTube out of like 20 channels that actually has an agency, an active agency that we run with a whole team and loads of clients. And even the people that do have an agency, they have an agency for agencies, you know? They're just kind of like, it's an education business which is kind of wrapped up in this bubble of, oh no, it's an agency still, but it isn't at all. So I think there's a lot of questionable ethics around the online education space as a whole. And I just think it's really important to just, okay, look at a specific person. Have they actually done what they're telling me that they can do for me? Do they have actual proof of that, and not just they've said that they were making X money from an agency at some point? There's a screenshot, is there proof of their clients? Can you see their team or whatever? Like, everything I've got is documented online and has been for years. So, yeah.
So when you were building out your agency and building out your team, what were the first people that you would say would be like the necessary hires? And what would you focus on? If you were to start all over again, who would be like the first people that you would hire to help you?
It's tricky because I think it really depends on whether you, I think when you go into an agency, you're either the sales guy or you're the service guy. So you're one or the other. And so you need to hire that other person as soon as you can. So not as soon as you can, but like when you feel pain. So like normally when it's like anything from 4 to 6 clients, something starts to slip. So like if you're doing all the sales and all the service delivery, at 4 to 6 clients, you're going to feel a little bit stretched, and then you're either going to start slacking on sales or start slacking on service delivery. So you then want to hire for whichever one of those roles like you don't actually enjoy the most. For the majority of people though, if you can be the salesperson, that is a better situation, because no one's going to be able to sell your product better than you are, especially in the initial stages, and you're not going to be able to afford to get like some shit hot salesperson in the business. So if you're wanting to get someone in on sales, you're better off actually taking in a business partner instead.
That makes sense. So to kind of complete the package, right?
Yeah.
I think that was something that a lot of tech CEOs speak about as well, is that you're either the builder or you're the salesman.
Yeah.
And if you're fortunate enough to be both, then your startup is going to be incredible. Like if you see someone like Elon Musk, he both sells and markets his products, but at the same time, he's also part of the building of it. So I think you're absolutely right. But of course, when in an agency, you must be incredibly busy. So what does a typical day in the life look like for you? Do you work every day of the week? Do you take weekends off? And on work days, how do you operate?
So it's completely transparent. I mean, we're now 4.5 years into the agency. My role in the actual agency itself is I'm more of a silent partner. I get involved in consulting in the agency. When about 2 years into the business, one of the other agencies that I helped scale, I actually bought one of them out and merged agencies with them. So my business partner now, Joe, who actually operates like 70% of the company, like 90% of the company, he manages the day-to-day operations. So as far as the agency is concerned, really I maybe jump on a call every couple of days. With the education business, I'm a lot more invested into it, and it kind of takes up 8 hours of my day working on creating content and developing the product and making sure the team have everything they need. So yeah, but as far as like day-to-day of the agency is concerned, like back in the day, like I would spend the majority of my time just taking sales calls, because I didn't really have much interest in doing the service myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there a specific morning routine that you follow? Because I know a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they kind of have a structure around their morning routine. So is there something specific that you like to do to make sure you're in the right spot to start working?
Yeah, I've always been big into morning routines. When I first started, that was like the main leverage I had. Like I read a book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and I started waking up at 5 a.m. I wake up at 6 now, but I used to start to wake up at 5, and I gained so much like leverage at that point. So what I do now anyway is I kind of wake up at 6. I'll like drink water straight away, and then I'll obviously do the usual stuff, brush my teeth, wash my face, and so on. And then I actually do red light therapy, so I've got like a red light therapy panel with infrared light, which kind of stimulates your mitochondria, your energy cells, kind of wakes you up, and it's also really good for your sleep later on in the day. I then ground, so I go out in the garden and I ground, and I get sun in my eyes to sync my circadian rhythm. I actually have a wellness coach who I work with who's kind of helped me with this routine over the last couple of months, because I went through this period of being super strict at the start of the business, and then I had this period in the middle where things are going well, and you just kind of let everything else slip, and you lose that balance. And then kind of now, last kind of 6 months, I've been really strict with it again. And so then I'll go to the gym after doing that, come back, eat breakfast. I have it meal prep, so there's like a meal prep company that I use, because I don't really want to have to think about cooking breakfast and lunch and stuff in the week. I just want to work. And that's pretty much it, man. Then I come back, take a really cold shower. I always do like ice therapy, like in the morning as well.
Do you practice any sort of mindfulness, stuff like meditations or anything like that?
So when I do the red light therapy, I meditate with that as well. It's like a 10-minute meditation every morning, yeah.
Okay, that's great. So going back to scaling your business once again, at what point did you start moving a little bit away from being actively involved? What was that decision like? Was that a decision based on you focusing more on sales, or what sort of caused that shift for you to start moving away from being actively involved and becoming more of a silent partner? Like
I think I never really wanted to create a business that was like going to make me like enslaved to it. So I never, especially at least with the agency, like, because like I think like you have to be really, really, really passionate about something to like want to like spend all your time working on it. And I don't think that thing for me is the agency itself. Like I love as the agency is created, and it's a great cash flow business. But I get a lot more enjoyment out of being able to help a larger group of people, which is why I invest more of my time into the education company. So the motivator really for removing myself from it as much as possible is so I could spend more time in the other business. But whilst not giving up any kind of like ownership of it. Like I still want to obviously be a majority shareholder in the company and be able to benefit from the cash flow. But I also want to be able to start other businesses and scale other ventures.
So is that the goal sort of for your future, looking into growing other businesses? And in general, what is your sort of wealth creation strategy like? So of course, the agency was the main driver in the beginning, but now do you tend to invest in other stuff? How do you look at sort of multiplying your wealth from here on, now they have more leverage when it comes to your money?
Yeah, I think that, I think it's actually, just as a caveat, I think it's quite easy for people to get lost in investment very quickly, like at the start of business. When you just make any money and it's like, okay, let me get sucked into that world. And I got sucked into quite a few like investment worlds and lost a lot of money, made a little bit of money and so on, lost money in the crypto world.
Yeah.
But I think for me right now, I actually started another business about 12 months ago, and I was kind of convinced, I was kind of blinded by this term that like the average millionaire has 6 businesses or something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have another business and start something else up. And then when I did that, I was like really stressed. It was like super stressful, trying to split my time. And so what I'm doing now is really just focusing on scaling out what I have currently and just really maximizing on that, because every business really has its peak of where it will get to. What I'll probably do in 3 to 5 years' time is sell them companies and take an exit on those, and then take 6-12 months to actually just decide, okay, what is the next path I'm going to take. I've got a few good ideas at the moment of things that I'd like to move into, but I very much see like the agency model and other businesses a bit like kind of drop shipping and Amazon FBA and those kind of businesses as they're gateway businesses. So it's great to get that cash flow and great to like get started. But if you can get out of that and get an exit and have a nice sum, and then use that to enter the next kind of threshold, the next milestone, the next level up, yeah, I think that'd be a really cool thing to do. So that's the plan for me. It's just kind of I'd like to buy some assets during a recession, but apart from that, like, I just continue scaling out what I got.
I think this is something that I heard Alex Hormozi speak about as well, is having, people who have, let's say, 10 businesses, but none of them are doing well.
Yeah.
And then he said one of his friends approached him with that exact problem, and he said, well, what if you just had one business? Could you make it work? And the guy's like, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, then why do you have the other 9?
Why would you? Yeah.
So we spoke about starting a business, and obviously it is very challenging, and you need to be able to sort of overcome failures and things like that. But what were some failures that spring to mind that made you perhaps not question going into business, but made you really sort of test your faith in yourself? Is there something memorable that comes to your mind?
It's so when I don't actually think that I've had like any really. Actually, no. I tell you what I did. I had a pretty big failure when I hosted it before COVID. I wanted to get into like public speaking, and I hosted this event in London, like a speaking event, and it went really well. We did good revenue from it. People loved it. And the person that I did the event with, like, had this lifelong dream, and it was like, oh, I want to do an event in New York. So we just kind of very naively were like, okay, we've done this event in London, it went well, let's go to New York and host the same event and do this. And honestly, we went to New York, we did this event, we were really excited for it. Probably about a quarter of the people that we wanted to turn up actually turned up. We lost about 20, 30 grand each on the event. So kind of like a big loss on it. And it was just a big slap in the face. And what it was though, it was so humbling because it kind of slapped us back to reality and made us realize that like the world is so much bigger than we are, and just because we've had one successful event and we've done one thing well doesn't mean we can just be so naive to just slap it anywhere we want and get the same result. So it was in all it was a really positive experience, but yeah, that was pretty tough.
What are some people that motivate you in your journey?
I think so. I'm not a massive follower of other people apart from my peers. Like I don't really idolize or like to focus on. I mean, actually, someone I watch a few videos of who I've got a lot of respect for is Alex Hormozy, for example, right? But I wouldn't say that he's somebody that I like look up to or aspire to be, because I think he's a very different person to I am. He's on a very different journey. But the way I get my motivation from is the people that are actually just around me all the time. So like my team members, my business partner, friends in the industry, like people that are like closer to my position, because I think that it's much easier to apply the knowledge that those people have. So yeah, I would say like my peers over some like.
So would you say for you would the bigger motivator be proving people right, so those who believe in you, proving them right, or proving people wrong, as in the people who said you would never make it? What drives you more? Is it the fact that you need to prove, the people who trusted you, or disprove the ones who didn't?
It's definitely the people that it's both. But like, and at the start, it was the people that didn't believe. But like, I proved them wrong like a long time ago. So I no longer think about those people. So it's really just continuing out the path. I feel like after a while, when you're set out on a journey and you're doing well and you've achieved goals, you get to a point where you kind of have a duty to the people around you to either settle and just like, okay, this is fine, let's enjoy it now, and like, for example, like your partner and your family if you've got one, and so on. But I think for me, what drives me now is the fact that I know, and everyone around me knows, that I'm only just getting started, and that what I've achieved right now is a fraction of what I want to achieve in the great scheme of my life. And so I almost have a duty to those people to fulfill that thing, and so it motivates me that kind of a promise, like as you said.
Absolutely. You mentioned Alex Hormozy, and obviously Alex right now is very heavily focused on building his personal brand. And of course, you already have quite a strong personal brand. What would you say were some key factors to building that? Was it like getting a media team? Was it hitting up YouTube? What was the biggest driver for you to grow your personal brand?
So the biggest driver initially was just documenting everything and just really just having that accountability. But it very quickly became a very strong revenue source. Like, I never really expected to make as much revenue as I did from YouTube, and because really all of our businesses are organic. We run ads, but really just retargeting ads. We spend very small amount of money on advertising, and so YouTube really acts for me as our lead pool, and so it's a fundamental part of the business. So I couldn't do without it. Yeah.
So, like you said, I think the importance now for a lot of people to understand is the personal brand that you build, like you said, drives business back to you. Because I think even Alex was saying that initially he didn't believe in that at all. He's like, why as a business owner, why do I need to show my face? He's like, we're just going to run ads to our company, and then that's how we're going to get business. But you've done the opposite. So let's say organically right now, as a social media expert, which platforms do you think offer the most bang for your buck for sort of small businesses and people who are trying to build their brand?
I think that YouTube is the best platform when it comes to longevity. Like, I truly believe that. But it's a platform that takes an awful lot of time to invest into it. You're not going to get results instantly at all, and it can take years to grow a channel. So I do really think that if you have a business that you could create video-based content, YouTube is definitely the platform for it. Of course, if you want quick wins, you do have platforms like TikTok and so on as well. But like, I know people, like, for example, yesterday I did an interview with someone that's got like 1.5 million followers on TikTok, and they don't actually make much revenue from it at all. And so I think the quality of the audience really has to be considered. So I would say YouTube, honestly, as the better platform. LinkedIn is good, but like, it really does depend on the industry.
When you first started your agency, what kind of businesses were you mostly focusing on?
So I was working with any kind of local business. Like, I worked with a restaurant, I worked with a jewelry store, I had a couple of gyms in the area, cosmetic dentistry. So kind of any local business that needed more customers and had like a bit of a broad audience. So anyone that kind of catered to a lot of people. That was what I was going through initially. And we now work with e-commerce brands, which are companies that sell products online.
Were you creating content as well initially when you started your agency?
Yeah, I was, as in for clients?
Yeah, for clients.
Yeah, I was. So when I looking back, the content was pretty terrible. But like, I remember when I used to start working with a business, I'd go into their shop or their store or whatever it was, and I would like create a video, like a promotional video around it, but I created it on my iPhone. Like, I didn't have a camera or anything back then. So I did create a little bit of content for people, but I found that it was a really time-consuming job for me to do for not an awful lot of money in the initial stage, because I wasn't exactly a pro, so I couldn't pay like good rates for it.
Yeah, so let's say for business owners who are starting out, would you recommend them to hire an agency or to get someone in-house? What do you think is a better return on investment? Because I know a lot of people, they spend quite a lot of money on having their own media team, having their own social people, and of course these are both things that an agency could be able to provide for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what makes most sense long term is having a in-person team. And I think that an agency really, even though I have one, it's just what I've come to understand is that an agency is like a short-term bridge for businesses. It almost teaches them, the service teaches them what they can do themselves. And then after a while, once they've spent money, they decide that it makes more sense for them to do it themselves. And that's something that we used to be like scared of, like in the initial stages, but we now facilitate that for people. We know that there's going to be a certain point where they're going to want to do things in-house, and then we actually just help them train up their team and do so. So I think agency first and then go in-house.
So I know you made a video on this, but just quickly, if you're a new agency owner, you started off your agency, how would you go about pricing your services, and what services would you focus on as an agency owner?
Pricing your services, in the initial stages, I think it's really important that you don't prioritize money as your number one North Star. So it's kind of irrelevant of how much you price yourself. Really the most important thing at the start is getting a case study. Like, it's worth so much more than even 10 grand a month, because you could have a 10 grand a month client and get terrible results for them, or they're just not suitable for you. And if you don't have a good case study, you're not going to be able to leverage them to get another client. So if we are talking about finances though, putting that aside, like, because the priority is just let me get them in for whatever I can get them in for, then anything from 500 to 1,000, like on a monthly basis, for like, let's say if you're running ads for a business, that would be absolutely fine. But the priority should just be getting them.
So how do you go about getting those initial clients and approaching those first few clients while you don't have any case studies? So let's say you're completely fresh in the game. How did you convince people to trust you with their image and with their brand while you don't have anything to sort of prove them with at the start?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? And I'd be lying if I said it was easy, because it isn't. And in those initial stages, it's like really important that you just speak with confidence and with conviction. And the only way that you're going to do that is if you have a good understanding of your service in the first place. So you want to actually understand what service you're trying to fulfill on some kind of level. Not you don't need to know the ins and outs of that service, but enough for you to talk confidently on it, because I think that's what's really going to set you back. what I've found is that the majority of businesses won't ask you for case studies or testimonials or anything like that. They will only do that if they don't actually trust you, or they don't believe that you are who you're saying you are, essentially. So I think as long as you speak with conviction, that's the most important thing.
So you of course know a lot of new agency owners and stuff. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when getting into this business?
The biggest mistake is easy. It's just that people don't stick to their targets. Like, people just do not stick to their targets. They also, and secondary to that, I would say that people just prioritize money, and so they sign up the wrong kind of businesses and then can't get them results, and then it damages their pride, and then they think that they're no good, and then they end up giving up. So I think those two things, not sticking to targets and then signing up the wrong kind of clients.
Let's talk about money for a little bit. So I know you have a clip about whether money buys happiness, but how do you see money? What does it represent to you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think money makes everything easier. I think that money makes everything a lot easier. But I think that, I mean, I'm not the guy to say, oh, money doesn't bring you happiness. I think money makes you more happy if you're already happy. I think if you are unhappy already in your life, money isn't the thing that's going to solve that. And I also think that money gives you the ability to look at the things that you already have and appreciate them in a completely different way. For example, like, I've kind of come full circle since making cash. I appreciate nature an awful lot more. I appreciate the very simple things in life. I appreciate my friends and the ability to go and travel and so on. Things that I could actually do anyway when I didn't have money, but I can see them and appreciate them in a completely different light because I've now seen the other side of the coin, and I'm not blinded, because I think many people are so blinded that money is the thing that's missing in their life that bridges their unhappy state to their happy state, and that simply isn't true for the majority of people. And I think it just makes life a lot easier. Yeah.
So you mentioned, I think, one book when we started the podcast. What are some books that sort of changed how you think and inspired you on your journey? What are some books that come to mind?
So I would say, so I mentioned that the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. That's a great book on morning routines. I also think that Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is a great book. The Way of the Superior Man is a good book. And I would also say Atomic Habits by James Clear is like an essential read for people, because I think a lot of people struggle to get new habits in their life.
So you mentioned The Way of the Superior Man. So what in your eyes makes a high value man?
Good question. I think almost the antichrist of what a lot of the bullshit that's going around online right now with this we've got this big masculinity movement at the moment, and I think some of it is just is incredibly childish. But I think that what makes a superior man, what makes a high performing man, is number one, humility. Like, being humble and actually not needing to prove yourself to anyone. I think it's something that I struggled with a lot when I was young. I had a big ego battle, as do many young guys. And you're constantly trying to prove yourself and set yourself and contrast yourself against other people. Look at me, I can do this, I can achieve this, and I'm flash, right? And I just think that's no real man does that. And so I think that's really important.
So you mentioned the whole masculinity movement and that you disagree with parts of it. What are some parts that sort of grind your gears that you think are bullshit?
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm all for masculine men. Like, I'm not against masculinity, of course. But I think that there's this little subsection of online personal development at the moment, which I just think is just a little bit ridiculous. I think that a lot of young men are in a very impressionable position at the moment, and they are looking at online kind of self-development coaches to kind of help them get through a period of their life, which is naturally challenging for anybody when you're going through your teens, you're finding yourself. But I think that some of it is quite toxic, and Yeah, I think it's tricky. I don't think everything that everybody is talking about right now is applicable to everyone, and I think that we are at danger at going down a very misogynistic route where we're kind of coming full circle to this point where, because I am a believer that in society women naturally have a role which is more suited to their chemical makeup and their hormonal makeup, and men have their role as well. But I don't think it's as black and white as that, and I don't think that we can set this standard rule for absolutely everybody. And I certainly do not believe that in all cases a woman should serve a man, and I think that's a route that a lot of this kind of masculine space is going down right now. That kind of men are men who go out and farm and dig and hunt and make money, and the woman provides and does this. And I just think, like, you can't impose that view on the entire world. And I also think with some cultures that can be a very dangerous view as well.
That's interesting. And I think what you said is that men are very easily, and young men especially, are very easily impressionable at the moment. But I think a lot of them are just trying to sort of find their footing in this life. So what would be your advice then if, let's say, someone's watching this and they're a young man, I don't know, early 20s or something, and they're a mess, essentially. Their life's gone downhill. They maybe, they're jobless, they're living with their parents, they don't know what to do with themselves. But again, a lot of them are going to go on YouTube and they're going to find some of these gurus, and like you said, maybe go down the wrong route. So how would you approach getting out of that hole? What would you think would be the big things that you'd focus on to get right, to get yourself on the right path?
I mean, honestly, for me, and this isn't the easy path at all, this is the more difficult path, but self-development is self-development. It's development on yourself by yourself, in my opinion. It's not watching some random guy on YouTube who's just talking shit to try and get you to buy some product from him. And so, for me, I think what's really important is that you prioritize spending time in your own company and really figuring out what it is that's driving you insane about doing that. Because I think a lot of people really struggle. I was on a podcast yesterday actually, and the guy mentioned to me that there was this study, and I don't know the exact number, so don't quote me on it, but there's over 50% of men that said that they would rather be electric shocked than spend 15 minutes in their own company, which is like bizarre. And I think a lot of people struggle with their own company, and I think if you can actually start to understand the reasons why you struggle with your own company, your insecurities, maybe you're body conscious, or you have wealth insecurity, or you have a whole bunch of different things it can be, right? And I think you just have to figure that out on your own, and the very fundamental things that you can do are just going out in nature, going for walks, getting into the gym, feeling confident about your body, like eating well, just very foundational health practices, not no-fap and trends like that,
So you mentioned ego and insecurity played a big part when you were a lot younger, right? You said you were trying to prove something and you were trying to feed your ego. How did you shift from that? How did you overcome that obsession with your own ego?
I think that it's a very gradual process. I think that it's not something that happens overnight. I think that actually you need to feed into your ego to actually master it. So my ego always was convinced, okay, money, status, power, they're the things, I need those things, and then I achieved those things, and I'm like, well, that wasn't really that interesting, that wasn't that fun, I'm kind of still left chasing something. And so I went through this almost spiritual journey where I just spent a lot of time in my own company, and I went out for walks an awful lot, and I went on holidays on my own, and I just really figured out who I was and what I wanted out of my life. And I realized that a lot of the stuff that I was chasing was really meaningless, and didn't really achieve an awful lot. And so I do actually think that's why I never would tell someone not to be materialistic, because I don't regret being materialistic early on in the business, because it taught me now that I can be frugal and I don't actually need to spend loads of money for me to be happy. But you can't tell somebody to do that. They have to actually experience it themselves,
So when it comes to ego, of course, you're a very public person and you probably receive quite a bit of hate just purely based on the numbers of people that you're reaching. How do you deal with that? Because I know, for example, listening to Joe Rogan, he said he doesn't read comments, he doesn't engage with them at all. First of all, A, do you get hate online? And then B, how do you deal with it?
I do get a little bit. As you put out more content, you just by rule of numbers, you're going to get people. But to be completely honest with you, it doesn't hit me at all, because when somebody says something like negative and somebody's like shooting you down and whatever, I really just feel sorry for that person, because I think it's always coming from a place of their own insecurity. And so I always look at it like that. I never allow myself to look at it as something which is serious or meaningful, because I'm like, well, that person has said this because of this insecurity that they have themselves, and I think it's a lot easier to take it in then.
I think you're absolutely right, and this is something that I mentioned a lot to people when talking about hate online. I said, imagine right now let's say you became a successful entrepreneur and then you make an exit from your company for £100 million. On that day, do you think you're going to go online and start spewing hate and going on YouTube and commenting negative stuff on people's comments? Like, you won't do that, right?
No way.
It never comes. I always say that hate never comes from above.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing well, you're not going to go out there and try to put people down. It's like you said, it's normally the people, you go on their profiles, it's either a private profile or the guy is like completely anonymous and he's trying to hide himself because he's not doing anything with himself. So I mentioned this quote. Are there any quotes or principles that have stuck with you that you kind of live by?
Yeah, I always say the same one, actually. It's change your thoughts and you change your world. So
that's a great quote, but how do you do that? If you're, let's say, stuck in one line of thinking, I mean, you mentioned sort of spending time with yourself and working on your internal state, but how do you change your thoughts? Do you expose yourself to new environments? Do you expose yourself to new people? What would you say is the best way of doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't, it's like with anything. If you try and like shock yourself into just, okay, today I'm going to decide that I am happy, and it's just not going to work, right? It's like it's a lengthy process, and you condition yourself over time. But I think what you really have to do is just put yourself in a position where you are reminding yourself of the thought chain that you are trying to change every single day, whether that's through scribing and journaling and practicing gratitude. Something I did a lot when I first started in the business. I would always gratitude journal every single morning, and I would document my goals and write those down as well. And I think, and reading content and reading books that are relevant. I actually find reading books in themselves is a better way for you to change your thought process than watching videos, because when you watch videos, you then take into consideration the person that's actually saying the stuff an awful lot more, and I think that comes into influence. And so it's just that kind of that okay, what is the thought chain that I'm trying to break, and then just doing small things daily to try and, over the period, like when you're forming a new habit, over a period of a month or 2 months, you're going to change that thought process, you know?
So when it comes to visualization, A, how do you practice it, and B, sort of what kind of impact did that have on you? Because I know you speak about it very highly, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm a massive believer in the law of attraction and manifestation. And I didn't even know what manifestation was until like 2-3 years ago. Like, into the business, someone told me, and I was like, wow, I've been doing that my whole life. And it's like, I think manifestation is an incredibly powerful thing, and actually every single day visualizing the position that you want to be in, your desired position, and not just visualizing it, like thinking, oh yeah, that'll be nice, I want a Lambo. But like, if a Lambo's your goal, cool. Like, but actually feel it, you know, like actually feel that emotion. Like, I'm going to embody the person that I need to be, to become, to actually achieve that thing. And I do truly believe that we can mold the energy around us and be able to literally fabricate the reality around us. And I think that the mind is an incredibly strong thing. And if you do not believe wholeheartedly that you're going to achieve something, you're going to make it very hard for yourself. So you need to embody the person that you need to become.
So a big thing I think in succeeding in life and in business is overcoming resistance, right? It's working on the days you don't want to work on and doing things that you sometimes don't want to do, because again, people see the glamorous side of running a business, right? They go on people's social media and they go on all of these successful entrepreneur social media accounts, and it's all yachts and supercars and things like that. But
yeah,
as you said, a lot of building a successful business is sales, it's cold calling, it's emailing, it's setting up processes. So what are some tips you have on overcoming resistance? So when you sit in front of your desk and you say, you know what, I'd much rather go and watch Netflix now, how do you force yourself to sort of stick with it and keep doing it?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I think that I would be lying if I said that every single time I meet resistance, I oppose it, because sometimes you won't. And I think it's really important to read your body, and within reason. I think as long as you're making sure that you're setting yourself up and your environment up to achieve whatever goal you're trying to achieve, and you eliminate distractions as much as you can, then you'll have a fighting chance. But sometimes you're just going to have a day when you're going to wake up and you really do not feel like working, or something's going wrong, or you're ill, or so on. And in those days, I think it's okay for you to cave and not combat resistance. But generally speaking, I think it's about your environment, and I think you just need to eliminate as many distractions or things that do take you away from that North Star as possible, whether that's putting your phone in a different room. I actually got a little safe in my office and I just chuck it in there sometimes. If not, I just put it like in a different room behind me. So I think eliminating distractions is really, really important, so you don't have those triggers in the first place.
That's interesting. So I think one thing I struggle with as someone who works a lot within social media is, like you said, staying away from your phone. And I think phone addiction is becoming a very big thing right now. You see it all the time. You're walking across a town square and pretty much 99% of people are on their phones.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much zombied out. They're just scrolling or whatever. So how do you deal with that as someone whose whole business is so focused on social media and the digital side of things?
So I used to convince myself that I needed social media on my phone all the time for me to work, and it's actually just a bullshit story I told myself, because I'm now logged out of all social media apps on my phone, and it doesn't make any difference. So I would recommend anyone doing that, actually. Just log out of the app, because what's crazy is like how much your brain is conditioned to like just subconsciously pick it up and click on Facebook, and then all of a sudden you're through the feed, and you're like, wow, how did I even get to this point? If you're not logged in on the app, then you actually have to log in every time you want to do it. And then you have to make the decision of whether or not you want to log in. Am I just subconsciously browsing right now? Or do I actually want to go look for something? And then you can log in. So do that. I also find that what I do when I'm actually working as well is I have my phone on black and white mode. So the phone is actually very uninteresting in itself. So that's another cool tip.
Yeah, I read about it as well, and that's actually something I've been doing as well. It's like if I triple click the side button on my iPhone, everything turns black and white.
Nice.
And yeah, that's actually a really good tip, because we're so visually stimulated as humans. And like you said, a lot of these apps are designed to keep you hooked.
Yeah.
And then keep you on the app, because obviously that's how they make money. They make money by advertising to you. So we spoke about some of the good advice and some of the good quotes. What do you think is some bad advice that you've been hearing, whether that's on social media or on YouTube, that you would disagree with? Is there anything that would come to mind?
I just think there's a lot of, I think it's very easy for people to, it's hard to pick out one thing, but I think it's very easy for people to jump on trends and jump on like kind of new information that kind of comes out and get distracted by information like it's a North Star. And I think at the moment there's a lot of information that's going around. I call an information epidemic, where we are really in a position where there's so much shiny objects, there's so much information, and then it actually makes it very hard for people to actually action anything and take anything on. So I think more than like what stuff is nonsense, I think it's more and more important now, because there is so much information and so much that flows around, that people just learn and regain the skill to just focus and like filter out the noise and just like stick to one thing and not be taking in too much extra shit that's going on.
So yeah, I think that's something that a couple of guests that I've had on have mentioned, is that a lot of people are focused on taking in as much information as they can, but it almost then becomes like a procrastination in its own.
Yeah, of course.
Because you feel productive, right? If you're sitting down and you spend 3 hours watching YouTube, but then you can justify it saying, well, it was all educational content and things like that. So how would you say people should balance that line between education and taking in information and actually doing stuff?
I think that you should allocate time on it. If you want to, if you enjoy watching YouTube videos, allocate time on a daily basis to doing it, but only just allocate that time and stick to that time. So if it's part of your morning routine to, I don't know, read books, but instead you want to watch YouTube videos, cool. Just allocate whatever time that is and just stick to it within those hours, and then don't go out of it. So that's probably what I would do. And I would also just only follow people that are relevant to you. I mean, I don't actually follow many people at all. But if I did, then I would only be following just like really relevant pages, because I don't want to get distracted by all this other information. It's hard enough to stay undistracted in your actual physical life, let alone like when you're on your phone in your virtual life as well.
This is a question I love asking people. What advice would you give your younger self? So let's say if you were to go back in time to when you were 20 years old, before the business, what advice would you give yourself
I would say simply stop waiting for the right time, because the right time never comes, and I always convince myself, and I knew I wanted to be a business owner from the age of 18 years old, and I maybe before that, but I really just wanted money at that stage, and for a very long time I didn't actually start a business because I, number one, convinced myself that I needed the next big idea, I needed the next Uber or the next Airbnb, and number two, I just always felt like it wasn't right. Oh, when I finish uni, I'll do it. When I've got a bit of money, I'll do it. When I've finished this job, I'll do it. And that time never comes until enough is enough, and then you actually do it.
And then finally, this is a question that I absolutely love asking. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? What's the big vision?
In 10 years' time, I'll have had a nice big fat exit on the companies that I've got currently. I'll probably be starting a complete passion. The next business will be a real complete passion play, because I absolutely love what I'm doing now. But I would be lying if I said I didn't get into this industry because it was a money-making opportunity. The next business is going to be purely passion play. So doing something like that I'm just absolutely obsessed with, and also working towards a new charity. So I want to start an environmental charity or organisation. Maybe not a charity, but just an organisation working on creating artificial ecosystems, which I know I'll need hundreds of millions for. So working towards that point, hopefully I'll be closer to that at that point.
That's the first I've ever heard of that. That sounds very interesting. Jordan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely amazing. I've learned a ton. Once again, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
No worries, man.
See you later.
Pleasure.
Thank you guys for watching. Goodbye.